Welcome back to another AEW news update, as CM Punk names the AEW wrestlers he'd like to work with, and in non-AEW related news, Punk also discussed what would have happened if he ever had a match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first, AEW and NXT have not had much luck recently, with heavy competition from US political news coverage often clashing with the two shows. The Capitol riots, Joe Biden's inauguration, and now the Trump impeachment trial have all happened on a Wednesday. It seems the ongoing trial has once again hurt the Wednesday Night War ratings, with both shows dropping in viewership. Cable news coverage took up 19 of the top 20 slots on Wednesday. MTV's The Challenge was the only non-news program to outdraw AEW on the night, as the Jacksonville promotion brought in an average of 741,000 viewers, down 12.2% from last week's Beach Break, which got an 844,000. In the key demo, they dropped from 0.32 to a 0.29. NXT finished outside the top 50 in this week's cable programs, coming in at number 62 with an overall viewership of 558,000, which is down 8% from last week's 610,000. They were also down 20% in the demo, from a 0.15 to a 0.12. This gives AEW their 56th victory of the war and their 66th win in the key demo. NXT have still only won the demo on one occasion and 9 times in overall viewership. This week, AEW have applied for 2 interesting trademarks. The terms filed are Forbidden Door and Forbidden Portal, both of which are for merchandise purposes. Both terms have been used to describe the issues between AEW and New Japan Pro-Wrestling, with the Forbidden Door now being opened following a reported deal between the two promotions to work together going forward. The phrase has been used on AEW television in the past week, and was even used by Tony Khan during a paid ad on Impact Wrestling last week, and Khan joked that he is the Forbidden Door. And if you haven't watched that clip, I'd highly recommend doing so. Khan seems to be getting the hang of being on camera, and it's pretty hilarious. Expect to see some Forbidden Door t-shirts popping up in the coming weeks as AEW look to cash in on the recent hype of their newly formed relationship with New Japan Pro-Wrestling. Former WWE Superstar Zack Ryder, now known as Matt Cardona, recently talked with Fightful to discuss freedom of not having a long-term deal with a wrestling promotion. He said, "Yes, so honestly, I don't want to sign anything long term. I was with WWE since 2006. I was 20 years old when I got signed. I was there for a long time, and I'm so grateful for everything that I got from WWE, everything I accomplished in WWE. But I'm not looking to just, okay, let's sign this 3-year deal with someone. I love the freedom I have right now." Following his release from WWE last year, Cardona showed up in AEW for a short run, which ended at All Out 2020. And has not returned to the promotion since. It's possible that the lack of desire to sign a long-term deal is what led to him leaving AEW, with them potentially looking for him to sign a contract before they invested too much TV time into him. His most recent appearances have been in Impact Wrestling, but is keeping his options open yet to sign a contract. He currently runs the Major Wrestling Figure podcast with former tag team partner Brian Myers, then known as Kurt Hawkins, as well as MJF's kayfabe attorney Mark Sterling. They are currently in the process of turning this Major Wrestling podcast into the Major Pod Network. Cardona has revealed that he passed on re-signing a deal with WWE in 2019, which was before his release, and his previous deal was in fact up in August of 2020, and admitted that he was strongly considering leaving anyway, and was relieved that the decision was made for him. Again, in the interview with Fightful, he said that 2020 was actually a very good year for him. He said, "It's the best, the absolute best. I can't even describe how amazing this time has been since leaving WWE. Because on paper, 2020 sucked for me. I got released, fired from my dream job. This global pandemic is going on. I had the coronavirus. I had to cancel my wedding. So on paper, it sucked. But in reality, it's maybe the best year ever." And if you haven't already, make sure you go and check out the Major Wrestling Figure podcast and the Major Pod Network, as there's a lot of great stuff on there for collectors. During another #AskPunk Q&A on Twitter, CM Punk revealed a couple of interesting bits of information that we're going to end this video with. He holds the Q&As quite regularly during his workouts, and yesterday he held another. CM Punk was asked which AEW wrestler he'd be interested in working with should he ever show up in the promotion, and he responded with some very interesting names. Twitter user HeelPags asked, "What current wrestler in AEW would you like to work with if you ever came back?" And the straight edge superstar answered, "I see 5 guys that have potential: Hobbs, Darby, Pillman, Starks, and Jungle Boy." That's not to say there aren't others, but those guys stick out. AEW is definitely stacked with some young future stars, and Punk seems to recognize that with his reply, and this even suggests that he watches the product to some degree, whether that be full shows on TNT or through clips on Twitter, which is most likely. And if you're enjoying the video so far, why not help me out and drop a like down below, and also subscribe as we try to reach 10,000 subscribers. But let's get back to the news. If I had to choose from the list Punk gave, I'd definitely go with Darby Allin. Darby is no doubt in line to be the next face of AEW in a few years' time, and a feud with a heel Punk playing the character of somebody that feels he's too big for AEW could definitely be money. One AEW wrestler felt left out, as Dr. Britt Baker responded to the tweet saying, "And also come on the waiting room, right?" The MJF Scarf Twitter account replied to Punk's tweet to point out a glaring omission from his list, posting an old photograph of a young MJF with Punk at a meet and greet. Now, if it was up to me, that's the match that needs to happen should CM Punk ever make an unlikely return to wrestling. The promos would be absolute gold and could really help MJF on his inevitable rise to the top of the business. Here's hoping that MJF responds to Punk's tweet, maybe sparking a war of words between the two men. Even a Twitter feud would be enough for me. And let me know in the comments below which AEW wrestler you'd like to see CM Punk go one-on-one with. And speaking of CM Punk, another interesting topic came up during his Q&A, with Punk being asked about a match with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Twitter user Tyler Somerville tweeted, "Back in 13-14 you almost fought Steve Austin. Do you think that would have been the greatest match of all time?" With Punk answering, "Would have been short, GTS 1, 2, 3. And that's some fighting words from Punk, with the Rattlesnake yet to respond. And let me know what you think the outcome of this match would have been. During the CM Punk interview with Mike Johnson at StarCast 3 on AEW All Out 2019 weekend, Punk did confirm that there was a sliver of time where the match was very possible, but as we know, it ultimately never came to be. The two clashed in a legendary promotional video for the WWE 13 video game, where they met in a sit-down interview with Jim Ross. This is likely the time period Punk was talking about, as things first used to promote the video game often come into fruition in real-life WWE, much like the return of Goldberg and the Ultimate Warrior. For me, that is the dream match, but ultimately for us fans, it's never gonna happen. They're easily my top 2 favorite wrestlers of all time, and never have two men been so different, yet so similar.